Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name's Nikko. This is Brighter Days, Darker Nights. And today I'm talking with Christine, and we're going to be chatting all about lactation, breastfeeding, circadian health, all kinds of good things. So thank you all for coming today. And for those of you who are catching the replay, welcome. You're so welcome here too. The chat is open for those who are live, so you're welcome to put in any questions as we're chatting. And Christine and I both we have eyes on that, so we can see and answer those questions. So thank you so much, Christine. Would you like to introduce yourself and share your Substack and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you, Nico. I've already learned so much from everything that you've been putting out on Substack.
Oh, thank you.
This might really destroy one of your questions, but I have to tell you that there is absolutely zero information about this that is getting to the average person who trains to become a lactation consultant, which is what I am. I'm
Right.
a board certified lactation consultant in California. I live in
Mhm.
Central California in the Central Valley, and I am primarily involved now in the work of mentoring and teaching other lactation consultants. So I've done that, in a variety of different ways. And so when I make generalizations like saying that the average lactation consultant in training gets nothing on this, I
Mhm.
honestly say that because I work for a company that is global, that provides global training. I've worked on, local, regional, state, national, international levels. And so
Mhm.
can say generally in a lot of ways, I can answer a lot of questions like that. And so what I've learned from you already has just totally affirmed so many of the things that I've seen in my career as a lactation consultant, where I come from a breastfeeding support group background, and a lot of people in the field come from that background, and then others come through a more healthcare background. When you come from the support group, you have the experience of working with and just knowing breastfeeding children of all ages throughout the entire spectrum and their mothers throughout the entire spectrum. It is vastly different to breastfeed a 3-week old than a 3-year old. It is a different
Mhm.
experience and you're a different person. It's 3 years later. So
Yes.
there's a lot of pieces of this that I think are going to carry into so many parts of what we do here in lactation world.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. See, I come from a support background too as a doula. And when you're in that support role, what I found was I started seeing so many different things that I wanted to educate about that I basically just had to start teaching because there's a lot of things that are really, really helpful that just haven't been incorporated because there's already this huge body of all of the existing processes around lactation support or birth support, whatever it is. So when we're getting this more cutting edge information introduced to it, that's a really difficult thing, but a really important thing. So I wanted to have you come and chat because of your role as not just a lactation consultant, but a lactation consultant trainer. I know that you're so experienced, and I know that you're really passionate about changing some of the things that are happening in lactation and improving it. It's not you have a very proactive approach. So that was one of the things I was really excited to ask you about is for you to kind of lay out some of the big key things that you see as potential room for improvement in the field of lactation.
Wow, what an awesome question. I
My big question for you. We'll just start out the gate with it.
that you are paying attention, like that you have really read what I've been writing and heard what I say on my podcast. My
Hmm.
Substack is called Evolve Lactation. And this is a title that I have come back to a couple of times over the last few years. And it is so right and rooted in my soul because I just, this is science. Like, this is something that is never going to be one way. We're never going to know everything. It's always going to be changing. And motherhood is changing and the world is changing. So when you have all of those things, you can't be set in your ways. You have to be able to adapt. If you don't, then you're just gonna get left behind, of course. We know that from so many realms in the world.
Mhm.
In the lactation field, just in the time that I've been in it, which I'm celebrating my 25th year in the lactation.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And it feels crazy to say that out loud. But when I started, breast pumps weren't really a thing. I mean, they existed, but they weren't a thing that everybody could even access. There was so much that was different about what it meant to even say the word breastfeeding. And I started in the field a few years after I started having children. And there just are just like huge, huge differences in how it was then and how it is now. But the pieces that were there in the beginning are not gone. It's just that we've added things.
Mhm.
Such a huge array of ways that people can feed babies now. And that makes it that where like our field has had to expand. We used to have, this size of stuff we had to know, and now we have like this size of stuff.
Yeah.
Hands go off the screen, but that's why. Because there's just so much that has changed in terms of what we need to know in the lactation field and how we speak to people, what we understand. I'm not just talking about the kinds of devices and tools that are available for breastfeeding. I'm talking about when I started in this field, one of the things that was a topic that was covered in one of the trainings was cultural things you would need to know about breastfeeding.
Mhm.
Was the most minimal thing you could even imagine. It was so like simple. It was very simplified. It didn't have anything specific to it. And it really wasn't relevant. It was white people saying what people who were not white like wanted or did or whatever. And it was so off. It
Yeah.
was so tone deaf in a way that we wouldn't have known at the time, but now we do. So it's things like that that have really made a difference in how we understand the spectrum of what people think breastfeeding is. But again, I'll return to this. Breastfeeding is not different than it used to be. It is still at its core, fundamentally, the way that human mammals feed their babies.
Yeah.
And when you zoom away from the United States and North America, you really do see that. Globally, we can say the majority of babies are breastfed. The
Yeah.
majority of babies sleep with their parents.
Mhm.
There's so many things that are globally accepted that we do differently here in the United States. And that makes the way that we talk about it different as well. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that you find that too, because you would have a different way of needing to teach a concept to somebody who is not based in this society.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a conversation with a practitioner recently. She works in Africa in her home areas. She describes it as a village. And so she came to learn about circadian health. And she's saying, well, my people already are living this way. We don't really have access to all of this disruptive technology. So what do I do? And so our conversation was around preservation. How do we preserve the environmental influences while still modernizing? There's a lot of things that are good about the modern world, but there are also other things that are very disruptive that are new challenges presented that weren't. We didn't used to have to think about circadian health because the way that we live naturally had it all in flow. So it was a nice conversation with her. And like the dark sky community is another one. They're working on that preservation element where if things are going really well, how do we protect that as we move forward? And then when we have gone too far in an abstention of a new direction, how do we, bring some of it? How do we rein a little bit back in? There's so many different questions. And yeah, I really like what you said about the scope of it having grown so much. And that's always one of the challenges because my brain is full of literature and experiences. I also look back and think, wow, have I really been studying birth for 20 years already? When I first started, in some ways I still have that same inspiration that I did then, but there is this. There's so much in my head, I can't just pass it all at once. So, what's the most relevant piece is always a question. um, and where getting that human support, because you can titrate it to the people that you're working with and what do they actually need most.
And that's so like a big piece of what happens in our teaching is that, we're training people to take this gigantic body of knowledge that they've just acquired and then go into a room where a person might need like 0.5% of the information that
Exactly.
you can't just give them everything that's in there because they don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
That's what the internet does to people.
Mhm.
That's the things that's changed about the way. So if we like zoom out to health literacy and how people understand things about health,
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear what you feel about this, but I've been thinking about health literacy a lot
Mhm.
because the internet has made us feel as if we have a higher health literacy than we might have. And I see this in people that I know in my personal life who in my estimation, have very low health literacy, but what they assume that they have is much higher because they can access information online. They
Yeah.
don't have a filter for it though, because they don't have a background in anatomy and physiology like a lactation.
Mhm.
They don't know if you don't know where organs are in the body, how would you understand the things that you're reading about what those organs do? So
Mhm.
that's really, really impacted breastfeeding in a lot of ways. We no longer get people coming to ask questions about what is happening for them. They are saying, I think this is what's happening. Can you help me with it?
Yes.
We resisted that for a while. We really stuck our feet in the sand and said, oh, this Dr. Google is just the worst thing ever. I don't know if it's the worst thing. It just means we have to change our approach. Are you seeing the same thing in terms of how people perceive their own health literacy?
Mhm.
We have to tell them more about where they can access information that is actually relevant, how to filter the information that they're getting, like what is a credible resource. And
Mhm.
most people, most average people, they're not trained to read research. So they could see something in a headline that feels like research,
Yeah.
feels like science, but it's not.
Mhm.
Fact of a study, like the first thing that you learn is reading the abstract is not going to tell you what this study found. That
Yeah.
it's written by the authors, and it's not necessarily what the study is really, coming.
Mhm.
So it it really does give people a false sense of security, and it definitely has affected the way that people prepare for childbirth and breastfeeding. There
Mhm.
there's been this shift away from any of the prenatal education that people used to get. And at the same time, people in the field have continued to teach the same things as we were teaching 20 years ago, which are really kind of no longer relevant.
Mm.
That's a hard thing to navigate as well because we really have to start adapting a lot faster.
Yeah, there's a need for continued education. So that was definitely one of the big things that I wanted to talk with you about was how do we responsibly evolve the field? How do we responsibly introduce new information to the field so that lactation consultants are prepared to meet people with the demands that they have now? Because there's already so much involved to it. I remember being absolutely shocked when I was looking at the IBCLC training and what was required, because it's not like you can just go and do a weekend training and then start giving women this kind of support. It's not really like a peer-to-peer support. It's much more of a highly educated and trained, which means that the information you get as a lactation consultant is highly codified, and those training programs are very expensive to create and maintain. Um, and it's already so much, like, how could you add anything to it? So I was wondering what your perspectives were, because I do find that circadian health is a huge piece of Not only the breastfeeding is a huge component of it. So for baby's circadian rhythm to be programmed properly, that baby should be breastfeeding and ideally from the breast to get that perfectly timed milk because of the way that the hormones and everything are shifted. And it's a really big piece of setting the initial foundation for that circadian health later on. So lactation consultants are really perfectly poised to be able to be an early point of intervention if they had the support and resources to be able to share with families about like what kind of light they're using during feedings in the night. Um, different things of with like pumping and storing. I agree that that wasn't a huge thing before, that now people get given breast pumps at baby showers. Like that to me is so bizarre that it's like kind of like just expected to be a part of everything when it used to be like it would be for like emergency situations or rare situations. Now it's just a part of everything as a whole. Really interesting cultural shift, at least here in the US. So, yeah, what kind of things do you have to say? Like, how's it been going with you? Like, since you are actually training lactation consultants, you have the ability to teach them information that, like, how much control do you have over your curriculum?
Personally, for Evolve Lactation, I have complete control. This is my organization. I
Yeah.
also contract work for other organizations which provide education. And
Mhm.
the beautiful things about our field is the IBCLC is an international credential. It's
Yes.
very, very hard to create a uniform training program.
Mhm.
So, what it is instead is a framework that your training has to fit into, which includes health science classes, health science education of a specific set, and those have to be college level. And then your basically 95 hours of didactic education in lactation specific information. So,
Mhm.
but there is an organizational chart of the information, basically the categories, the detailed
Okay.
and outline contains the categories of information you have to learn within that lactation training. And then you have to have your clinical experience, which is a little bit different depending on which way you're entering into the field. So,
Mhm.
framework where people can fit into that with whatever is available to them in the region where they're working.
So they're potentially getting very different education depending on where they are, even though it's an international certification.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then when you're done with all those 3 things, then you sit for the board exam, which is the same exam that is given to you if you live in a small rural village on a different continent, or if
Oh.
you an urban center in the United. So you're taking the same test. So you can imagine how a question about breastfeeding could appear to have different answers depending on what you have seen in your clinical experience. If
Yeah.
all you have ever seen is that people both breastfeed and pump, how are you answering the same question as a person who has never seen a breast pump?
Mhm.
Scary to them. It's a picture in a textbook. So
Yes.
it really presents a lot of challenges. But
Mhm.
because it's such a flexible and adaptable system, every region, every state, every organization has the flexibility to be able to say, this is information that we think that lactation consultants need. We can create a framework of information we can put on this training. And there are ways to have that certified as something that an IBCLC can use for recertification. But of course, people can always take trainings and education that don't apply, they don't qualify for those continuing education units, but that they feel are very relevant to their practice. We
Mhm.
know a ridiculously small amount of information about how to counsel someone on nutrition because
Oh.
it is mostly within outside of the scope of practice of an IBCLC to provide really detailed nutrition information. We're expected to provide basic nutrition information about how to eat during pregnancy, how to eat during breastfeeding. And if somebody has specific needs, we're expected to be able to refer them to somebody else.
Okay.
But an IBCLC in a place where there isn't somebody else would necessarily need more information about that. You
Mhm.
think about circadian knowledge, that it's global. Like everybody needs to know this, but it also can be tailored to the part of the world where you are and
Mhm.
type of lifestyle people have, how much sunlight is available to them, all those things. And to me, that's why it's fascinating because what you would teach them would be different and it would
Yeah.
be special.
Mhm.
Feel
Yeah.
personal.
Yeah, it is. I get really different questions depending on latitude and the season that baby's born because that initial breastfeeding lion is so important for establishing breastfeeding. So many families are not doing a traditional lion during that period. It's considered a luxury in the US to be able to do that. And I often hear I couldn't afford it. I didn't have the care, all kinds of things. I didn't even know about it. Oh, that's just not my personality. And all of these different ways of describing that they didn't do a lion. They basically brought their baby home and were trying to just be up and around, like right back to everyday life, which is not how breastfeeding and relationship is initiated. So when I teach about doing a lion, then there's that question of, well, what if it's in the middle of winter? What if it's in the middle of summer? That might look very, very different depending on that. And that's where there's the information that you can find online as an individual searching, how do you do a postpartum lion? I want to try to do this. And then you get the prescription. But then when it comes to actually carrying it out in your area, if you've never done it and you've never seen it done, you've never supported anyone in it, then that's where the nuance would be great for more professionals to have that full sense of the understanding how to do it, why it should be done, and describe all of that. Um, I'm curious what kinds of, like you mentioned nutrition, are there a couple of other areas, that the information you think could be updated, or like the types of information outside of your codified field that you have been seeking out to better support your clients?
Yeah, for sure. I spent a long time in 2024. So let me back this story up. In
Sure.
2023, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh,
And I thought to myself, I'm a lactation consultant. I should know a lot more about this than I actually did the day that she called me and told me. And
yeah.
I was just appalled at how little information there was online that had anything to do with breast cancer and breast health. It was
Wow. That's a major gap.
Yeah, it's tremendous. So I took about a year to do research and reading about what information is actually available about how to keep breasts healthy. Because if you Google breast health as a term, 80% of what you get is about breast cancer and maybe 20% is about breastfeeding.
Mhm.
And they're not combined. They're not together. There's tons of information that comes out during pink washing month in October about where everybody needs to know about breast cancer, but almost all of the messaging completely ignores breastfeeding as part of the strategy for prevention. So
Mhm.
bring in different different so I looked into things like the physical therapy field, the emergency medicine field. Like, what does an emergency medicine practitioner need to know about the breasts and
Yeah.
how to treat an injury to the breasts? And it turns out there's a lot about that that is really important to know. I'll get
Mm.
specific on this one. I didn't even know this until I did this research, but there's a specific set of red flags to listen for if someone is lactating currently and is involved in a motor vehicle accident or some other kind of blunt force trauma to their breasts.
Oh.
I didn't even know. Never heard about it. It's nowhere. So, in that way, I took a lot of information from the menopause research that's blowing up right now, just lots and lots of different things that feed into it, and tried to put together something that's a little bit different about breast health.
Mhm.
perspective of a person who understands that breasts are an organ that functions and have a function, but also change and adapt throughout the lifetime. And
Mhm.
so much more out there that we really need to know in our field and outside of our field. So
Yeah.
the way that I did it was for my fellow lactation consultant, but I'm also trying to expand that into something that is really relevant to any perinatal professional and
Mhm.
beyond that to every human being who has breasts, which is
Yeah.
all human beings. So we think that we need to know about how the breasts develop. How does early nutrition impact that? How does being born preterm impact breast development? What
Mhm.
does it really mean to have early puberty? What is early puberty? Do we really know when puberty is supposed to be? And I'm sure that there's probably some elements and threads in there that you're hearing where you're like, yeah, there's a circadian element to this too that people
Yes.
understand. So it just
Yes. We definitely are looking in all those areas too, whether it's trauma and injuries and recovery and how does the circadian rhythm influence healing and what's the optimal light environment for a time when you need to be in bed rest. All definitely with breast cancer, artificial light at night is a known carcinogen. Um, and you see that breast cancer treatments are much, much more successful if the woman's circadian rhythm is stabilized as part of her treatment. You also see that with regard to when they do the treatments, the timing of those. There's so, so, so many ties in there. Likewise with puberty and the circadian rhythm and melatonin. Yeah, everything that you mentioned is something that we also bump into where I started with, I want birth to be smoother. I want women to have a better experience of birth. I want babies to have a better experience of being welcomed, outside of the womb into the world of breathing air. And then from there, it's really grown. All of these different areas are all related to our ability to provide support at this very initial stage of life that sets the tone for everything else. So what you're saying completely resonates with me, and that's why I knew you were going to be the perfect guest to bring on and have this conversation, because you're thinking very, very big, which just naturally happens if you're curious about your field. And as you talk with women, like different types of issues come up. So with your experience as a lactation consultant and in training lactation consultants, like with the changes, what are the things that people are coming to you with now, like that are, some, like you mentioned that some of them are coming in saying, they've already self-diagnosed and they want your help with their recovery from their self-diagnosed condition. Like, what are some of those things that they're bringing to you now?
there's so much misunderstanding that comes from going too fast in the beginning. A lot of it goes back to, and we've got one of the people that's here. I want to call out to Dr. Jimmy Francis, who's here watching this today and commenting in the chat. She will recognize too. This starts with the beginning of breastfeeding. I mean, yes, but just allow me to say it starts with the beginning of breastfeeding, the first hours, the first days, and how things start. Because we have medicalized birth so much, and most births happen in a hospital environment, there are things that are skipped too often that put people in a mindset that everything that they're doing about feeding their baby has to be managed in a certain way, or they have to fix certain things about their routine that are not really necessary to fix. They're not problems, but they didn't get the fundamental information. So, if you're in the hospital with your brand new baby who isn't latching, and the first thing that is done is they give your baby formula and tell you to start pumping. Well, a lot of times you don't get a whole lot of instructions on how to do that. You are not being taught how to latch because your baby is not being supported to do so.
Mhm.
Or whatever is happening. Maybe your baby is not able to do so because they were born early or have an injury or something. But anyway, you're like not getting any of the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And you're trying to do both of those things from a place of not enough information, and you're looking up the wrong things online. You think
Mhm.
problem is this, but it's not. And this has been a problem for a while with like one specific example. People will say, I'm pumping and I'm not getting enough milk for what my baby needs.
Mhm. I'm so glad you brought that up because I get that so much now. I'm having to do consultations with women who have been through the hospital rigmarole that sent them home with the pump, and then they're coming to me as a postpartum doula, and they're asking me to help them wean off of the pump to get to breastfeeding, and that whole thing, they don't get the continued support from the lactation consultant after they left, and so they just have this bizarre protocol pumping protocol that they only half understand, and then they're like, I wanna nurse my baby like all the other moms that I see nursing their babies, but I have this, like, pump between us that I'm afraid to stop because I'm afraid I'm gonna hurt my baby. They're not gonna have enough milk, right? So, how how are you supporting women who are being put through that, and ending up in that situation?
The thing with pumping early is that it sets people up to believe they don't have enough milk,
Yeah,
really even because they don't have a certain amount of milk. It isn't even about that. It's about being able to see the milk and focusing on the milk instead of focusing on the baby and
yeah,
look at what's happening with your baby to understand what they need. And so what we often have to do is, obviously it always depends on how old the baby is and other things that are going on, but often people think that they don't have enough milk because they don't know how much milk they're supposed to have, because they don't know how much milk their baby is actually supposed to get, because they weren't taught how to properly paste bottle feed their baby, because they weren't taught, like, it always is like 1,000 steps back,
mhm,
which pieces are missing.
yeah,
And that is so much more common than encountering somebody who's asking for help with their milk production or with breastfeeding that actually has medical or physiological problems that are going to prevent them from making all the milk that they need, right?
mhm,
And trying to take someone from the situation you described where they wanted to breastfeed and suddenly now they're pumping and they really want to get back to it. If they don't believe that they make all the milk their baby needs because of what's been happening with their pumping, how are they going to cross that bridge and
yeah,
trust that when they bring their baby to the breast, their baby's going to be full and that the next time their baby needs milk, the baby's going to ask. They're going to recognize the communication cues and they're going to be able to bring the baby back to the breast. Because if you get into the pattern and the habit of, I have to use a breast pump every this many minutes or every this many hours,
mhm,
it's hard to go back to having
yeah,
that your baby can communicate what they need and that your body will respond to that. And
mhm,
that in early, it's not impossible to get back to that. And I work with plenty of people who got back to that sort of faith place that it is, but
yeah,
huge bridge to cross if you miss it the first time. If you don't
mhm,
believe that it's all going to work together from the beginning, it's a big process to get back across that and restore that trust and restore that faith in both the baby and your body after a birth where maybe you felt like your body betrayed you. Right? Like there's so many factors that feed into these things. So, what interests me a lot about what you teach is so like the practical things that people can add into what they do. Because I always feel like when somebody asks me for help, they describe their routine. My goal is not to get them to stop doing a bunch of things or make them feel like they've done anything wrong. What I want to do is suggest things that they can add. And I see the same thing in the way that you teach. Well, here's a few things that you could try. You don't have to try all of them at the same time. You don't have to do all four of these things, but let's add this thing in for a week or two and see how that works in your life. Right. And
mhm,
in a lot of ways, it's the same way with breastfeeding. And
yeah,
those things, I really think if we work together, we can combine some of those things. We
mhm,
people some suggestions and options that they could add in that combine both of those things together and improve both areas of health.
mhm. Yeah, it is. What happens during the postpartum and early postpartum for the woman, the family, and her baby, they're all setting the stage for health down the road. So there's an element of needing to get through the challenges of the present moment, but there's also an element of the challenges. You're building a snowball, and so what's like if the snowball is lopsided at the beginning, then it's like, the challenge of getting it to roll right is always going to be a little bit more difficult than if in the beginning everything is padded together nicely and the woman and baby are well supported and you have a nice round snowball. Everything else, you'll still see it in the teen years when, that baby girl is hitting puberty, and her breast development and all of those things happening are totally, the stage is set in pregnancy and this time. So it is just incredibly impactful to be able to work with a family and help them through these challenges to get back on track earlier while the lopsided shape, for this metaphor, is still visible because eventually um, it'll look round from the outside, but that core will still be there.
Jimmy's agreeing with you there in the comments about good because it does tend to happen very early on, and
Mhm.
without a lot of people don't have the structure of lots of friends around them who are doing things the same way, and if
Yeah,
they can miss out on either knowing that something they want instinctively is actually normal and other people do it, or
yeah.
being able to pick up on things that are different about themselves or about their babies. And this is places where I'll call on my peer support group background again. There's no substitute for that. You've got to be around other people,
Mhm.
same similar situation, sometimes in order to pick up on patterns. I always think about this person that came to breastfeeding support group when I was going with my babies. And, 99% of the conversation was about our babies and about breastfeeding and all this stuff. But because she was attending every month and our facilitator was also an IBCL, she picked up on red flags from this woman that she was actually having major pelvic floor problems. This
Oh.
not anyone else in her life was picking up on, and that
Mhm.
addressed without the pattern that IBCLC picked up on, but other people in the group also were going to the IBCLC and saying, some of the things she's saying are a little bit worrying. Like it doesn't seem like it is for the rest of us. I
Yeah.
was wrapped up in my own baby. I wasn't one of those people that picked up on it, but other moms did because they were in a different space.
Mhm.
Something about that you just if you're not living among your extended family or living in a community of people you know really well, there's no one around to say, "Your baby is so adorable, and I've noticed that he hasn't," like, do you have bigger clothes for him? Or is your baby still wearing the same clothes because he hasn't isn't growing very big? Like, I remember talking to a friend, our kids were little, like in kindergarten, I think. So I didn't know her when we had babies, and she found out what I did. I was a lactation consultant at a hospital, and she said, "Oh, really? That's a thing?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so we kind of talked about it. She's like, "Oh, that's kind of like when my sister-in-law had a baby that wasn't feeding very well. And she came over and I was like, oh my gosh, that kid's got to eat." And I grabbed the baby and I nursed the baby. And, for a couple of days we did that and we figured it all out. And then everything was fine. We didn't need a lactation consultant. I was like, yeah, that's the point. Like, that's the what I was trying to
Yep.
we don't want to have to do this. We want people to have this information to be empowered. And that's one of the things that I'm doing with Evolve is, you know, taking away the gates and taking this information outside of the paywall of like, oh, you're in this formalized training process to become a lactation consultant. Great, if that's what you want to do. But what if you don't want to do that, but you need this information because you
Mhm.
also people in life who have lactating breasts, or
Yeah.
do for a living. Like, I don't think we should be gatekeeping this knowledge about how the function of lactation really works, or
Mhm.
eating works, because they are different things, you know? Lactation is part of breastfeeding, and breastfeeding is part of lactation, but they really are different things, and we have to define them specifically and accurately in order to understand what we're talking about. If I say breastfeeding, but you think that what you are doing is not breastfeeding because you don't breastfeed at every single feeding, or you define it differently, then we're not it's like we're not speaking the same language. We have to be really specific and really knowledgeable, and that's another place where that health literacy question really comes in. We have to be speaking the same language when we're putting information out as public health experts on whatever topic we are. You know,
Mhm.
I think that's one of the places where I feel like Substack has given us most. They take a little bit more time. They're willing to read things that are going deeper.
Yeah.
They're people like you who write with references at the end because that matters. There's
Mhm.
a lot that we can do with a platform like Substack that isn't possible on a social media platform that's just like this. You can't learn that, and people
Yeah.
are learning about breastfeeding from TikTok. Well, they're learning some things, but they're definitely not getting depth that they can,
Mhm.
you know, apply to their health literacy. And I there's definitely value in the way that we can use video, and that people can say, I'm really struggling to latch my baby. I'm going to go watch 25 videos on TikTok or YouTube. Good. Like, I want you to do that if that's the way that you learn. And then I want you to filter that through a person who's knowledgeable and can say, yes, that looks like you are, things are working for you, versus just trying to wing it on your own by watching 25 videos. Like,
Mhm.
that is the function at this point of any healthcare practitioner. You know,
Mhm.
you think about what's going on with you. Is there anything that a medical care provider can do for me that I can't do for myself? Sometimes I need an antibiotic. I can't get that myself. Sometimes I need an x-ray. Sometimes I need a really complicated look at something that I couldn't possibly understand because I didn't go to medical school. But sometimes I have a headache because 'cause I'm dehydrated and I'm not sleeping well, and, it's about sort of filtering through all those things. Breastfeeding is the same. We have to be able to give people the fundamentals, let more people in on the knowledge so that we have the space to work with people who really do have complicated lactation situations and complicated issues with breastfeeding that are making it hard for them, because we really have to make it possible for more people to be able to breastfeed the way that they want to.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I love what you shared about the peer support being such an important part of it because, I when I taught the breastfeeding class that I did last year, I put out several like questions to the community, and the responses were really interesting. One of the most engaging questions, and what you said about how when you get in the mom group, it's like 90% talking about babies and breastfeeding because it's really engaging and there really is a lot of nuance to it, especially across all the different stages of extended breastfeeding, tandem breastfeeding. There's so many different things that can come up. But when I asked people, "Where did you learn about breastfeeding?" Was it from your mom? Did you grow up seeing it? Which, like for me, I had a younger sibling who was fairly close in age, and then it was a small family, so I never saw my mom breastfeed, definitely not. Whereas, my children, my 13-year-old has seen me breastfeed 4 children. Um, so, like, my daughter's not gonna grow up not having seen her mom breastfeed, but there's still the whole community element. So, getting together in that peer support, the beautiful, like, crystal or snowflake that everyone makes together of the knowledge is really, um, it's more random than the linear knowledge of a trained professional, but collectively, all of that, there's that kind of, like, warning sign where a lot of people will know, um when someone does need that additional level of care or when there's a little shift that they could make just right there in the group, um, that is like that it's not like one or the other is more important. They're both parts of supporting lactation as a whole.
And parenting as a whole, because
Yeah.
the other thing that happens in our the current group that I do is a baby cafe where support people are also invited to accompany the person who's breastfeeding. So they come, and sometimes what they learn are practical things that have nothing to do with breastfeeding. They have to do with diapering or weighing a
Yeah.
baby, understanding how much babies are supposed to gain, or how to use this car seat in this stroller. Like the stuff that matters
Mhm.
are part of something, instead of like they're just by themselves trying to navigate something that no one do. And
Mhm.
it is sometimes presented to them on social media and on as is natural. Everybody's able to do it and it's wonderful, and it's not for everybody, and it's hard, and there's other people who are doing it. So why not do it together? It's the
Mhm.
right is to do things together and to work together on everything, because we don't function well when we're alone. Like we
Mhm.
sure to put somebody in a cell and lock them up by themselves and not have human contact, right? But that same concept, and we work it into the rest of how we function as humans. No
Mhm.
treated like that, right? There's no reason for that, and we have to look at the practices that we have, which
Mhm.
really do some of the same things. We can't take a newborn baby and make them sleep in a different place than where their parents are, where there's no human contact for long periods of time, nobody to answer their communication, and no change again in the light until the other human comes along.
Yeah.
Room dark and they're in there for 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours. What time do they think it is? What time does their
Mhm.
that it is? What kind of safety do they feel if nobody responds when they ask for something?
Mhm. Oh, it breaks my heart.
All
Really.
breastfeeding, it's part of, you know, understanding each piece of it. You have to think about the whole. You can't, there's no talking about babies and sleep without talking about how the baby is feeding. There's
Yeah.
no about breastfeeding without understanding how the baby is sleeping, where the
Mhm. Yeah.
happening during the night? That's my question. I don't ask about infant sleep. I ask my clients to tell me about your night times. What happens during the night? Because, first of all, people don't consider the nighttime the same time. In your house, night might be 10 p.m. In my house, maybe it's 8 p.m. In their house, maybe it's midnight. And I learned that very early on as a breastfeeding mother, because our closest friends who also had a baby at the same time, bedtime was midnight for them. That is when they, as parents, went to bed, and that is what they considered the beginning of the night. So when she and I talked about how many times did the baby breastfeed, we were talking about a different span of time.
Right.
Like it was a really different conversation. So
Mhm.
nighttime and bedtime and all those things are different in different places. But I
Mhm.
on again through the support groups that breastfeeding and sleep are so intertwined, they cannot be separated. And if you do something to manipulate one of them, it necessarily impacts the other one. If
Yeah.
you baby sleep, it impacts breastfeeding. If you intervene in breastfeeding, you impact how a baby sleeps.
Mhm.
Later, and
So true.
that's so true early, and then later on, it impacts their development. So it's important to look at all those things holistically rather than just as one thing, or to believe
Mhm.
one way, you know?
Yeah.
We are
Mhm.
there are so many ways. We are adaptable. And the thing about breastfeeding is that it is made to be a flexible system. It
Mhm.
frame but the framework is very adjustable, right? And that's the part that a lot of times people lose sight of, or no one ever tells them that it can also look like this. It doesn't have to look like that.
Mhm.
this. Some moms find that this works. Like, there's so many ways.
Yeah. Yep, I see that a lot in a lot of the language that you're using around, kind of just opening mom's eyes to different ways that a lot of times they'll come into it with a very fixed idea based on their previous experiences, but it's a very diverse, there are diverse possibilities, so being able to connect with another woman who knows about all of those possibilities. Like, it's good to have a way that you wanna do things, but it's also good to be open-minded and talk with other people who have experience. I definitely recommend anyone, if they have the ability to coordinate a mom's circle or to create their own mom's circle, to do that, because it will open up those social things. And I often talk about how social cues are also circadian rhythm cues, and we're not really meant to parent in isolation, especially through the early stages where you're carrying your baby all the time. You need extra sets of hands around, so organizing a mom's circle where you really get to know each other and have that extra support and those different little ideas and encouragements along the way, not just to gripe, but also to be proactive and find solutions and things to experiment with. I always come home with so many ideas from the mom circles that I participate with, and it's a great way to connect and for your, children to grow up and see you getting support, for those who do have larger families. Um, it becomes all the more important for this knowledge because everyone is growing together in it. The one of the women who coordinates my local mom circle, and we sometimes will, take turns hosting. She has 5 children, and I have 5 children, and many of the moms are women who have a lot of children. So when we all come together, the children can play, they get to interact with each other, have their own social experiences, while us moms are together sitting around the breastfeeding circle swapping recipes and stories and, just feeling okay, like this is a stage of life that we're all in, and there's so much information there that is communicated, and so much of that sense of safety, that you were talking about, I find is one of like, safety and trust are some of the biggest challenges from, people. One of my, colleagues, I'm going to be doing a Substack Live with her soon, but she teaches about moms and how to recover from anxiety, because what you're saying about women having these very fixed ideas, and especially if they've been spending a lot of time on TikTok or social media, whatever it is, and it drives cortisol up, which is a stress hormone. So a lot of women, I think that possibly a couple, generations or even just a couple decades ago, there was not so much cortisol and not so much anxiety as there is now, and that's really taking a big toll on women in the space of coming into motherhood, where they're having to get up and function on a different sleep pattern, than they're used to. And then what they've told, like, just like with breastfeeding and sleep being interacting with each other, I'm always trying to give moms more flexibility on what they expect their sleep to look like, because it's so different in this time, of breastfeeding and having a new baby. But you don't have to feel like horrible all the time. It's possible to be fairly, rested and have a robust sense of health if everything is, just kind of joggled and allowed to be a little bit more flexible than maybe you imagined that it would be.
Yeah, and that also reminds me too that I'm sure you've done the same thing. We've had to stratify how we counsel people because so many people are becoming mothers for the first time much later. And so
Yeah.
if I'm a new mother who's 22, that's very different than working with a new mother who's 39.
Yeah.
One is not better than the other. They are simply different and they require different things because
Mhm.
physically there are differences in the way that their breasts and their body will respond
Yeah.
and that they're used to sleeping and in the way that they are willing to learn things or feel like they're trying things versus feel like they're supposed to know everything already. Like
Mhm.
there's that modern consulting is different than, like I said, when I started 25 years ago, it just
Yeah.
didn't. So as we see more people become mothers for the first time later on, those
Mhm.
are well, and you have to have again the fundamental anatomical and physiological underpinning of that has to be how do hormones change at when you are in your early 20s versus your late 30s? How do your needs change from a circadian perspective during those time frames? What else is happening in your life? What conditions have you, non-communicable diseases maybe that you have, or conditions have you accumulated
Yes.
becoming a mother later in life than when you were younger? I have more things with me now than I had when I was having babies. I'm
Mhm.
just so we have had to make those adaptations, and
Mhm.
we have to continue to really look at things specifically and notice those patterns, and just keep on supporting each other in all of these different fields that feed into the whole health, because all of it makes a difference. And you might know things that, make it easier for somebody to breastfeed when they're older that I wouldn't even know, because it's not the way that we've typically looked at it. We've always looked at breastfeeding as sort of this one way that this is how it happened, but
Yeah.
it doesn't happen the same way for everybody. And
Mhm.
sure that we used to know that generations ago, because we lived in proximity to people that we knew well.
Yeah.
I am people that lives across the country from where I grew up. So I don't have some built-in group of people that I've known forever.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of things about that mean that we've lost knowledge that we have to reclaim.
Yes, definitely. That's so true, and definitely something we're all working on, for the new people who are just now joining. Earlier on, we had a really, um, broad conversation around the interdisciplinary nature of being a professional lactation consultant, anymore, and also with your own health as an individual, being able to seek out different sources of information is now more possible than ever, which is a good thing, but can also feel overwhelming when there's so many different voices out there. And one of the things that is really great, though, is that there are people like you, Christine, people like me, where we have taken one area of specialty and then we've really put in and made another intersection that is not that every single lactation consultant necessarily needs all of this information. It would be good if they did, but that you are the lactation consultant that has that information, that I am the doula that has this information, makes it like there's so much availability to work with specialists who are beyond just the one track linear carbon copy that comes out of the training, but that has also layered on a lot of different information to be able to support uh, the exact people who are right for us to support, who need that particular intersection of information, is really a wonderful thing that I appreciate about the current era and how much interdisciplinary work is going on here.
I totally agree. I appreciate that, how you talked about that, like layering, and I think that's what makes every person special. And there are people who need the specific combination of
Hmm.
that you have, that I have, and that lots of people who've joined us today on this live have, that they have put together, and I'm just really excited. I think about my cousin who's in medical school right now, and he has a paramedic background. And so
Hmm.
yes, eventually he decided that he is going into emergency medicine, and that makes a lot of sense. But
Yeah.
bringing a really specific set of skills and background, having been a paramedic during COVID, like
Yeah.
he that to his medical career, and that is something that not every doctor is going to have. So
Hmm.
that matters. And you yourself up by being open to new information. That is how we grow. That's how we evolve. That's how we adapt to what the
Hmm.
I'm this was amazing. I'm just so glad that you invited me and we got to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Evolve Lactation is your Substack handle, and you have program for practitioners for lactation, but you're kind of opening towards all perinatal professionals. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I offer is tailored to lactation consultants, but it's around lactation information. So any perinatal professional who's interested is,
Mhm.
and it just broadens the ability of all of us to learn together. So,
Yeah, it's really important. And yeah, so being able to understand not just the immediate sphere of lactation, but also how it ripples out towards like breast cancer, towards just breast health as a whole, that they're not just a tool, they're a part of our body that we carry with us through the whole spectrum of life as really profound and important. And in addition to the field. So thank you so much for your time. I'll make sure to include your links for anyone that wants to connect further. You have a podcast as well, is that right? That people could hear more of your perspectives here. Excellent.
yeah,
Anything else you'd like to share before sign off?
yeah, I mean, you can find my podcast on my Substack, so it's
Okay, great.
the regular podcast players as well. Evolve
Hmm.
podcast, and I invite you to join me. I talk about all kinds of different things and mostly lactation related. I mean, like mostly, but
Hmm.
really just appreciate that everybody spent so much time with us here today. It's just amazing. I love that.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, we'll be in touch again soon. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today and everyone catching the replay as well. Hope you all have a wonderful day.
Bye.